Craig and I guess, met here in this room, and like so many of us. And you know, Craig was so multifaceted that people bonded with Craig over all kinds of things. But it was always music that you know was above all. That was a foundation that began our friendship. And I had a genuine love of the music Craig made. It's just beautiful to me. And beyond being, you know, experimental and being improvisational, it was also extremely musical. And sometimes it even sounded as if it was previously composed, even though it was just right on the spot. And we had many long talks about that, as well as songcraft. And Craig was a tough critic, but a very encouraging critic of what I did, and I always really appreciated that, and love Craig very much. And I want to play something that I wrote for him the other day. It's called Grand Canyon. Never one to wonder about the things this life that we chose that made it all worth living through the horrors that life throws. And if the recently departed make the sunsets, say farewell to the ones they leave behind. There were technicolor hues to see our sadness through. The sun over Athens said goodbye, say goodbye. There's a white owl out my window, soft lit and fading light. It goes soaring through the clouds, it go hunting through the night. And in my dreams I'll still see him flying through a western sky. And I'll think about Grand Canyon, and I'll lift my glass and smile. My flashing smile.
You have to bear with me. As many times as I've been on this stage and all the others, this actually makes me a little nervous. I'm sure a lot of stories have been shared over the last couple of weeks that start out like Greg was one of the first people I met in Athens and I liked him immediately. But we've been hearing those for a long time, a lot longer than that. I not only liked him, I saw a really unique quality in him. I'd never seen anyone who had such a seemingly gruff disposition from a distance but could warm up so much the closer you get. He had a goodness about him, almost a gentleness that was welcoming, could cut through any noise. If I'd just gotten to know Craig as the cool guy that worked at the 40 Watt, I would have really missed out. But I got lucky. He became part of our cast of characters in this comedy, melodrama, reality show about 11 people that all live on a mobile home that somebody moves every time they go to sleep. And I would get up usually before everybody else. I was always the first one. I'd make coffee and whatever. But if I turned on the TV, it would always be on Sports Center. It would be left on Sports Center. And for the longest time, I had no idea which occupant in this clown car was staying up all hours of the night watching Sports Center. But it was man of mystery, Craig Lieske. That was time that he had kind of carved out for himself to get some alone, quiet time. That was his thing. And we all had our ways of dealing with the monotony and tedium and overcrowdedness and people all around. And for Craig especially, he sold our merchandise, so for several hours a night, he was in constant human contact, back and forth, talk. And so he probably needed a little more. He was nicer than me, but everybody's got their limits. And he would hang out, turn the TV on Sports Center, chill. But sometimes he would go up to the front, I know, and chat with the bus driver during those last hours before sunup. So those guys get lonely, and I think Craig knew that. And we've got a couple of regular drivers that I know are going to miss him as much as we do. No doubt about it. But we had to go back out on the road and do a few shows for the first time without Craig. And I got up, flipped on the TV, and I was surprised that it wasn't on Sports Center. I was actually surprised. So I wasn't thinking about Craig at all. I don't know, I think I was thinking about anything. But I laughed. It was sad, but I laughed. And then I thought about the way he laughed, and I laughed harder. And it felt like we were laughing together, it really did. So when you let people like that into your life, you make these little associations like that you don't even know you have until they're gone. But you also agree to whatever pain and sadness that comes your way when you lose them. But I'm glad I took that chance on Craig. And I think it's people like Craig and friends like Craig that make us willing to keep taking that chance over and over. Thank you.
Short guy microphone. Excuse me 1 minute. I was not only Craig's friend, I was also his bartender. I think he's... I'm going to read a statement prepared by the Lieske family, and do my best to do them proud. Craig has been blessed with so many good friends and acquaintances who are with us today and everywhere. We are so thankful that he had the experience with working and associating with all of you. The music and arts culture is truly all of what Craig believed it to be. We hope that Craig's legacy will be passed on to help other musicians through the memorial contributions in his name at Nucci Space. We don't think that Craig would have had it any other way. The family would like to thank Patterson and Rebecca Hood and all of the truckers, Jane Clamp, Chris Herring, David Gregory, David Barbie, Dave Marr, Janet Geddes, Jim Wilson, E. Sershin Brandon, David Basham, Steve Miller, Mike Cooley, Matt DeFilippis, Killick Hines, Jen Bryant, Caroline Barrett, and so many other members of his music family, too numerous to mention, for their tireless efforts to support us in our moment of grief. A special thanks to Barry for providing the venue, the 40 Watt, and kind and loving thoughts today and in his life. The love and support of all of you will be cherished in our hearts forever. We have been simply overwhelmed by the testimonials of so many of Craig's friends and acquaintances. We had no ideas how many lives he touched. Thank you so much.
Hello, thanks for coming out. Just like to say that there's so much to say about Craig. You can talk for, we've been talking for weeks about it. It's usually about how much we loved him, how much he loved everybody else, how easy he was to get along with and talk to. Go on like that for years, I'm sure we will. I just want to say that we spent a lot of time together out on the road, and when you do that, you become very close brothers. And, it's cool you mentioned, it was surprising to me that we didn't find out what a big sports fan Craig was. Apparently he would just watch any sport that was on television at any time. And, so he was into stats. So I checked out a few stats, and I think Craig did right about 500 shows with us. I think it was 2007. I was just hired as tour manager, and the first thing I did was hire Craig to be our guitar tech, which lasted, I think, 2 shows. He instantly became our merch guy at that point. And, it was about 500 shows ago, and as most people know him, as I did, standing right out front, right at the door of the 40 watt. He was also a man of the world, and I think we played those 500 shows in about 43 different states, in about a dozen different countries. And my job is to, wrangle cats. We played at Billy Bob's Fort Worth the other day, and we shared our backstage with a rodeo, the backstage of a rodeo. And I'd always wanted to be a cowboy, so I started thinking about what I do, and it's definitely wrangling cats as opposed to wrangling cows. But Craig was the cool cat. All Craig ever needed to know was what time the bus was leaving, and his job was going to get done at the highest level of professionalism, as so many of you who met him out there at the merch table could know. And, he helped raise our business level to just a whole nother thing. Went from selling a few T-shirts and a couple CDs to, he would have over 50 things back there well displayed, and he was extremely well at his job, is all I'm trying to say. He was good at everything he did, and he will be missed. Thank you.
Hi, before I read what I wrote earlier today, I just want to say one thing that has been extraordinary in talking to customers at the bookshop who either knew Craig really well or had never met him, is that usually when someone passes away, you think, God, I wish I had told him I loved him. I wish I'd given him a hug. And I really think something amazing about Craig is that every single person I've talked to who lost him got a chance to tell him, I love you, Craig, and he got to say the same to you, so I think we're really lucky. Just a few days after we started dating in 2006, Jim introduced me to Craig. He was friendly but reserved, and I got the feeling he was sizing me up, making sure I was going to treat Jim right. Months later, Craig and I got into a conversation at Flickr, and he confirmed my suspicions. He very openly admitted, I wasn't sure about you at first, but I really like you. I love Jim, and you're really good for him. I like you two together. It took him a while to reach that conclusion, but I'm really grateful he did. And therein began a friendship unlike any other I've ever had. Craig was a brother or father figure to many of you here today. He protected and loved Jim ferociously, something I've always been very grateful for. When he caught wind of my plans to open an independent bookstore, Craig immediately began asking if there was any way at all he could help. Alphabetizing books, lugging heavy boxes, hitting the streets with flyers, you name it, he volunteered for it. I'll do anything, he'd tell me at least once a month. You don't have to pay me or anything. I just want to help. A few weeks later, I'd run into him again somewhere on Washington Street. Seriously, Janet, anything, let me know. About a year after the bookshop opened at last, I was ready to hire another bookseller. How about Craig, Jim asked. Duh, of course, Craig. I didn't even post the job anywhere as I had my dream candidate ready. Craig agreed immediately and began to work as an avid bookseller this past October. He took to the job immediately. Customers loved him for his quirks and encyclopedic book knowledge. Since Craig's death, there's been an outpouring of love and testimonials from tons of customers, many of whom said they deliberately dropped by Avid to talk to Craig during his shifts about books, music, life, and with charming frequency, Melinda, whom he adored. Craig and I grew close these last few months, talking at the bookshop during lulls. He told me how much he learned about customer service and retail by selling books with his mom years ago. He told me that his sister Gretchen was awesome and loved bragging about his beloved niece Sierra. He expressed how grateful he was that he and his dad had gotten close, and he laughed with me as I told him how cute it was that his dad often dropped him off for work. He told me how much respect, admiration, and love he had for Jim, and he, at least once a week, told me how proud he was of me and this whole bookstore thing. He also spent a lot of time talking about how happy he was with Melinda, that he'd somehow turned into a guy who was so in love he'd just as soon make dinner at home and spend an evening in, so he wouldn't even go out on the town. Craig watched out for us. Sometimes he had to give tough love, but it always came straight from the heart. He was so proud of all of you, all of us, but always encouraged us all to keep striving. This past Christmas, the bookshop was slammed. Craig told me I was overdoing it and on the verge of burning out. "Oh no, do I seem crazy?" I asked him. "Oh no, not crazy. Trust me, I've seen crazy. You're just getting close to being burned out and you need a break." After Christmas, I went to Florida for a few days. Dr. Craig prescribed 2 hours alone on the beach. "I'll try," I told him. "Don't try, do it," he said. I got a message from him while I was out of town. Here's our conversation. "Janet, thanks for the early check. Best boss ever. Make it to the beach yet?" "No beach yet, but I might go to the ocean with my sister later," I replied. "You'd better," he said. And I did. And while I stood on the beach looking at the moon, I thought, I can't wait to tell Craig I took his advice and actually did come here. I'm grateful I took a chance after that to thank him for that and to tell him I loved him. I'm really grateful for Craig.
Hey everybody. I've been thinking so much and feeling so much and so much to say, I have no idea what to say. So I wrote something down real quick and let's find out what happened. I started working here at the 40 Watt in May of 2001. And this is where I've met most of the folks that make up most all the bands that I've had the fortune of performing with the last dozen years. I kept pretty quiet in the beginning of my working here, and not just because I found the managerial duo of Craig Lieske and Josh Jordan super intimidating, but I was a little shy at the beginning and still trying to find my way musically as a person here in town as well. And right from the start, the 40 Watt family was warm and welcoming to me and have been ever since. And that's pretty much, where everyone and all of us comes in, and especially Craig. Man, so much. I'll do this every Monday. Every Monday, I would go to the 40 Watt employee meetings where we would all hash out, the week's workload. And naturally, before and after these meetings were perfect times for folks to hang out. A lot of us, either in bands or people, friends, happy hour, this or that. And on a few of these occasions, Craig and I would go into a place like the Burnstone Brewing Company, which is now the Cupper Creek down the road. It was a place where folks there kind of knew me, but they didn't know Craig. And so we would go there and tell the unassuming bartender that my dad, whom I had not seen in years, was paying me a surprise visit from San Diego. And then, and then stories would ensue, flying out of Craig's mind of how he and my mom met in Mexico City or somewhere on the sidewalks of Tijuana. And it was just always so much fun, and literally we would do this over, you know, like a couple beers, and that would be that awesome experience. And I later found out in playing music with Craig over the years in so many different bands that interactions like the one that I just shared with you, for me, it was exactly like playing improvisational music with Craig Lieske. It was amazing. It was always new, spontaneous, and above all, it was always an open line of communication. And for me, that is just awesome. I think Craig showed me a new dimension that exists in music and in life. And as soon as he showed me that, I was, you know, like a little kid in a candy store. Man, I think that's so cool. So for me, Craig Lieske was this is where I get silly, a spiritual guru riding on a sound frequency, day to day, every day. I'm serious, and he was heading right into the heart of this town, and I can't be grateful enough. It has been an honor and a pleasure to be a recipient of that gift for the last dozen years, and I'm happy to be here celebrating Craig with y'all today.
I always liked that picture of Craig. I always thought it made him look like that guy from Slade a little bit. Just a little. I've been asked to say a few words, and please excuse me for the notes. I'm not particularly good at this, and I don't think anyone should ever really be good at this. Looking around the club and the faces that are here today, I find it hard to separate Craig from the memories and impressions that he left behind with us, both on stage and off. For many of us, as I mentioned before, Craig was the gatekeeper into the 40 Watt Club. He was part talent scout, part coach, part manager, and for a lot of us, he was our first friend in the club. He was the first person that we would strike up conversations with. Usually as your door guy, you're trying to find out, how am I going to get more shifts? How am I going to, what music does he like? What can I talk about with this guy? So he'd be the first person when you would come in that you would interact with and say hello. Craig was the first person to give me a chance, and many of the people out in the house today, a chance to work at the club, a chance to become part of this family, to become part of the 40 Watt family and the Athens music family. And he did that for the better part of a decade. I'm always amazed when I go back and look at the Christmas photos from the 40 Watt Club, just the amazing caliber of the staff that has passed through these doors. And a lot of that has to do with Craig. I'm not sure I ever thanked him enough for bringing me into the club. There's a lot of reasons why I stayed in Athens, and that eventually led to me meeting my wife and going on to create a family of my own. And I don't think that would have been possible had Craig not given me that first shift. As a manager, what I recall most about Craig is his calmness, surprising calmness, either with or without a cigarette, in the face of both the ridiculously real and the ridiculously ridiculous situations that pop up in the club. No matter what, he always seemed to handle it with grace, charm, wit, and a wonderful sense of humor. When I first heard the word that Friday, that terrible Friday. I felt a lot. My first thoughts were what George Harrison had said about after the passing of Brian Epstein. When he was interviewed for that Beatles anthology, many years ago, he said, looking back, he said, "We were caught at a time, and our best friend is gone. What does it mean? What does it mean to us?" To me, it means a great sense of sadness. It means a great sense of loss. And then I remember what, even though later-day charlatan, what the Maharishi said, one of the few brilliant things that was like, God, this guy, he said the most profound thing, and I understand why it stuck with the Beatles at that time. He said, if you keep your thoughts positive, keep your memories positive, they will find their way to him. And I believe that. I'm so glad that we had that Thursday. I'm so glad that we had these last chance for these interactions to have them, that we got a chance to see him perform, that we got a chance to see him do his job, that we got a chance to hang out with him. And I remember a lot of the last things he said to me, and I was in the office as once with a big show, there's a lot of flurry of activity, especially towards the beginning. You're trying to take care of people, make sure everybody's in place, make sure the band's happy, make sure things are going smoothly. And I was getting a little bit ragged. And Craig saw me in the office, and he tapped me on my knee and said, "It's okay. Just take a breath. There's time." And I remember that a lot. I just remember just how profound that was, the perfect thing to say at the perfect time. And Craig was like that. I'll memorialize Craig today, and I'll memorialize him every day I walk into this club. Every time I schedule the door staff, every time I pay out a band, I'll memorialize him whenever I step outside my personal comfort zone of music and try to listen to something different. Expand your horizons. Craig was big about that. He would talk to you like, what are you listening to? What are you into? What are you listening to? And he would share. He'd share, I'm into this. And that was good. That was a way to blend together, find your influences. In a town like Athens that has such a magic to it, there's an amazing amount of artistry and creativity for a town this small. It is mind-blowing. It's people, especially when they come from other areas, they see you have so much. You have so much going on in this town. I'm like, yeah, it's kind of amazing. But in a town like this, we have truly lost one of our unique and individual voices. And that is a pause for sadness. However, Craig is here. Craig is here today. Craig will always be here with us. The great void might have him, but his spirit lives on. To you, Craig.
You'll have to bear with me, I haven't had a lot of sleep lately. I knew Craig the whole time I lived up here. I got to play music with him for a long time, and it was a good thing. And it'd be silly to say that Craig made me the person that I am today, because Craig personally didn't do that, but the musical community here in Athens, I think, probably did make me who I am today, which is a cooler person than the person that moved here. And Craig, to me, was always the representative and the face of that community. And I say community because there's a music scene and there are musical communities. Because I am a fool, I study Greek and Latin, Don't get to play rock a whole lot. Don't do it. And the word scene actually is the English version of the Latin version of the Greek word skene, which is the performance space in a Greek amphitheater where plays are performed. It's the stage, the physical part. So the music scene in a town is the spot where is the group of people, the sum total of people that perform on stage in whatever capacity, musical capacity. Athens has one, and within that scene there's different musical communities. And when I moved here in 2000, I was also really tired. I hadn't slept for 30-something hours. Didn't have a place to live. The obvious thing to do was to go to Tasty World and see Saifu. Yes, exactly, right, exactly. And I was there, and I was out of it, and I was getting bombarded by this stuff, and I said to myself, this is awesome. And my friend Claire turned to me and said, Saifu was playing, I couldn't hear anything. And, what? And then the song ended, and everyone got to hear Claire tell me, these are the real rockers, in a really loud voice. And I said to myself, awesome, I want to meet these real rockers because I want to be a real rocker. And that was my introduction to the rock and roll community here in Athens. A few days after that, I met these real rockers. I met Mark and Chris and Brian Head, and they took me, and J-Man, and they all took me to the 40 Watt to meet Craig, whom I met. Everyone has their meeting story. I think we talked about Napalm Death for like an hour. And I immediately knew that Craig was, if not the president of the rock and roll community here, he was more probably the shaman or the medicine man. Because you've all seen him play guitar. He can channel the rock and roll gods with a chopstick and an egg beater. It's like the Delphic Oracle. It's this pure rock and roll spirit stuff that's not worth trying to explain. So let me move on here. But that's what Craig always was to me. He really represented everything that I love about Athens, and still been missed to this day. So to try to keep this brief, 2 main points. Craig was my hero, and the second point is Craig is a hero. And the first one is my personal little story, and the second one is something that I'm going to propose. Craig was my hero for everything that I just mentioned, everything I love about Athens. He represented that to me. And I found a poem that I'm going to read to you. It's by a British post-structuralist poet, active during the late 70s and early 80s. A lot of his stuff got put to music. I think he died about 20 years ago. There's a poet named Lindsay Kohlmeister. And the poem is called Rock and Roll. This is an excerpt from it. I'm in love with rock and roll. It satisfies my soul. That's how it has to be. I won't get mad. I've got rock and roll to save me from the cold. And if that's all there is, it ain't so bad, rock and roll. So, this to me, this is how we live. This is the rock and roll community. This is what Craig represents to me. He doesn't love rock and roll, he's in love with rock and roll. You can love something, but being in love with something, there's that participle there, being, that's a present tense. Present tense, no future, there's no past, it's a continuing moment. I don't think there was ever a moment when Craig was not actively in love with rock and roll and everything associated with it. And why? Well, the next line tells you, it satisfies my soul. Every person's got that little dark bucket inside of them that you can fill it up or you can feed it, but you got to put something in there. And I know from my experience that rock and roll satisfies my soul. I know that it did for Craig. You could tell. You could just tell. The next line, that's how it has to be. I never felt like I had a choice but to want to play music, to want to be loud. I don't think Craig ever bothered with thinking that he might have had a choice, playing music, being surrounded by music, dedicating his life to music. That's how it had to be. And he accepted it. The next line, I won't get mad. Accept your destiny, be who you are, be true to yourself, and be honest about it. Don't get angry about it. The next 2 lines I like. I've got rock and roll to save me from the cold. Craig worked here, surrounded by music, surrounded by musicians. Craig was part of the Drive-By Truckers crew, surrounded by music, surrounded by musicians, surrounded by people that care about all that. It put a roof over his head. It saved him from the cold. Put clothes on his back. It saved him from the cold. It made him an important part of a huge, extended family. It kept him out of the cold of loneliness. And all our love for him are going to still keep him out of the cold of obscurity. Now, if that's all there is, it ain't so bad. Like the line about, that's how it has to be. Once you accept it, you let it take over you, if you let that higher power that we call rock and roll work through us, we put our trust in it, then, I mean, what does it do? It satisfies your soul. It keeps you from getting angry at being yourself. It saves you from the cold. If that's all there is, yeah, that ain't so bad. That ain't so bad at all. And that to me was really the best thing about Craig, was his joy at living the life that he lived. And that's one of the reasons why I admire him so much. It's one of the reasons why I admire, a lot of you, the lights are really bright, but you know, Jason, Griffin, Patrick, Jim, all you people, everyone that spent their whole life just wanting to rock out and be awesome. You're doing a great job. That's why Craig was my hero. Craig is a hero because of the problem with heroes. And I don't like this, but like I told you about the unfortunate Greek and Latin, and that's taken over my life now. The Greco-Roman hero is different. There's a hero and there's a tragic hero. And the problem with the hero is that they're larger than life. They do things other people can't. They're always an inspiration and a mystery at the same time. And right when they're at the top of their game and in the prime of their life, they're taken away because they have a perfect record, and that's not human. And so the Greeks would immortalize these people as having been too perfect to be human, and you got to snatch them while they're at the top of their game, because if they get any better, then they just move on to the next level while they're still human, and that's apparently not possible. The tragic hero is the same person, but lives to be old, lives a little longer, lives long enough to fail and disappoint everyone. And if you've ever read a Greek tragedy, that's where the word comes from. It's horrible. We do this to celebrities. If Mel Gibson had died after making Braveheart, he'd be the best actor in the world. And now he's a crazy person. And that's not heroic. That's tragic. And I'm a little flippant with that, but that's how it works. You can't have it both ways. And Craig accepted his life and lived the way that it was, knowing full well that rock and roll is a fickle mistress. And I'm not happy about this at all. My solace in this is that Craig is now really kind of superhuman, and he has got a perfect record now. He can't ever fail us at all. And as long as we remember him, then he is truly a hero and immortal, and we'll never forget him. I'll never forget him. Thank you for letting me talk. Now, if you know me at all, you know that every time I toast, I have to toast to Slayer as per an agreement I made with certain higher powers a long time ago. And you laugh. Craig is one of the only people on this planet that have observed this fact about me and never asked why. In fact, the first time I did it, Craig, barked, "Ha!" and said, "Hell yeah," to Slayer. We were right there. And then every time after that, he knew it was coming and never bothered to ask why, because he understood. So here's the Slayer. Here's the rock and roll as a fickle but loving mistress in whom we should all place our trust. And here's to Craig.
I was asked to come up here and say a few words tonight, or today, and I had some problem with that because I think there are 100 people in this room that are more qualified and suited to do that than 1,000 in this community. But I realized that Craig had such a personal relationship with all of us because he was so engaged in life that I can maybe represent that and what he was to all of us here. And the first time I saw Craig, it must have been early February 1996. Those are hazy days, and a lot's happened since then. I remember it being this room, like a lot of other people do, and I will always associate him with that. I saw him across the room, that hair and those eyes, and he was physically rocking back and forward, and he was talking to somebody, and I was thinking, now there's a character. I really want to talk to that guy. So I kind of started edging my way over there. I was just curious, like, who is this guy? What's he doing? And I got closer, and I got over to the edge of it, and I got kind of sucked in. He was having a conversation with somebody about Sun Ra, and maybe I made my way a little too much into the group of strangers, but he noticed me, and he started darting his eyes over, and he was, incorporating me in a little bit, and the people he was talking to, they finally left to get a drink, and he turned around and said, "What's your story?" And I made some sort of a lame retort like, "I don't really have a story." But he cut me off and he said, "Bullshit. Anyone creeping around the edge of a conversation about Sun Ra has a story." And so Craig, for the first time, started to draw me out that night. And I think after that, anytime I saw him, whether we had 2 minutes or 2 hours, if I encountered Craig, we had a full-blown conversation. If there wasn't time for that, he might lean in and say, "I was thinking about that thing you said," and you realized he really was thinking about that thing you said. And he was thinking about all the things that all those other people he engaged in conversation said. He was also thinking about what he read in books and his own thoughts, and I really don't know how he organized that, his time to be able to focus or think about all those things, but he did. And Craig made us feel good about ourselves because as much as he knew or thought, he always wanted to know what you thought and what you were doing. And he'd wrap you up in his ideas, but he wanted to get wrapped up in your ideas and have this real and meaningful one-on-one relationship with you. And I think that's why so many people are hurting from what's happened with our loss of Craig. And the way he worked a conversation is a skill that isn't shared by enough people these days. There's a phrase, small minds talk about people, normal minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas. And Craig was an idea man all the way. There's no doubt. He wanted everyone to express themselves creatively and to really think and express their ideas. And he didn't always make it easy on you either. I mean, if he wanted to challenge me to do something or call me out on something, it was always my last name. It was, "Tissenbaum, are you trying to tell me?" Or, "Tissenbaum, we're going to," and he'd be rocking back and forth, closing the space between you and then opening it up, letting you breathe a little bit and respond. And other times, he'd just call me Mark, and I knew then he just wanted to open up another conversation and engage again and maybe start fresh and go somewhere else. And I would argue that for all of his vast knowledge and his great oratory and his interest in people and places and thoughts and activities that he encountered in conversation and travel and reading and his musical pursuits, Craig would have been the greatest silent film star ever. I mean, look at the slides we saw. Look at all the photos we've been sharing. Craig is the most visually intriguing man I have ever seen in my life. You always knew his whole person was involved in everything he was doing, just like that first time I saw him. And it was a thing that I didn't share with people, that as much as I like talking to Craig, I always loved, up to the very end, to observe him talking to someone from a distance like that very first time I saw him, because he was engaged. And in being engaged is really the only definition of life there is. If you are in the moment and you are living and you are paying attention to what's going on, you can't really ask for more than that. And it's not really going to make any of us feel better, but I was thinking about that, and I'm thinking he had so much more to offer, and he's 48 years old, and we all miss him so much right now. But as engaged as he was in his life, in 48 years, Craig lived more than most people on this earth would live in 80 or 90 years. And we got to give him that. So, a few years ago, I became a Greenland tolerant. And Craig Makers Mark Lieske, more than anybody else, else, knowing how much I loved whiskey, probably commiserated with me more than anyone else. So I can't drink this for Craig. I'm going to have to drink tequila, but here's to Craig.
I think Craig would have liked that I'm reading this off an iPad. I'm saving paper. After Craig got back from last year's tour of Florida with Sursen and Melinda, I asked how it went. Craig said it was a great trip and lots of fun. And then he leaned into his confidential stance and said, honestly, I don't know how Sursen found some of the places he booked. Some of them were pretty scary. I would have never gone in alone, but we made good music along the way. So if Craig found those places scary, they must have been very scary. Thank you, Sursen, for getting Craig out of his comfort zone, which was otherwise quite wide, maybe legendarily so. I love the way Craig played music with the totality of his being. His soul was out on full display. He goaded, he supported, he surprised, he shredded, he constantly reinvented. Craig's Hamer guitar, which is here, his Hamer guitar was simply the way he got himself converted into electricity, but he didn't need his fingers to pluck strings for his music to be available. The musical dialogue never shut off, as we've heard from other people today. He was a generous listener and knew how to cultivate someone's evolution into something greater, deeper, and better. This was on and off stage. There is a gentle lyricism behind any of the raucous sounds Craig made. In fact, it was the tension between his love for straightforward rock and jazz music and the unconstrained improvisational discoveries Craig gravitated towards that made his performances so consistently infused with joy and sparkle, wild abandon, and fuel for the next round. He pulled new things out of his hat, and like a magician, pulled new things out of your hat, even if you didn't realize you were wearing a hat. Craig cleaned up well, too. Our local NPR affiliate was about to host Craig's band Desk Pussy on the air, but they were concerned about the name Desk Pussy. No problem, they'd be Roll Top Feline. He had the best self-censorship I know. I wrote to Craig from New Mexico several years ago. I told him I was Georgia O'Keeffing it. He wrote back, Georgia O'Keeffing it? You mean painting stylized vaginas? Thank you.
Well, there's a few other things that nuts and bolts to kind of get out of the way that I should have said earlier, but just didn't get around to it. Just facts such as the stuff in the program about going to Craig's Facebook page and sharing stories. Please do it. If you want to hear his music, Southern Shelter, and making donations in his name in Nietzsche's space. Now that I'm doing that, I can forget about what I was supposed to remember and just say a couple more things. Listening to everybody say these things about Craig, which are all true, and just reminded me of so much, it made me think of, enough of you are probably the right age where you saw Lady and the Tramp, and the dog is like, goes to one place and he's that place's dog, and this family's dog, and the restaurant's dog, and everybody loves him in their own way. And I think that Craig clearly had a special relationship with each and every one of us in here. The other thing I'm struck by is that a number of years ago when I was young and trying to figure out what to do with my life, which I guess I'm probably never going to stop doing in a lot of ways, my dad said, don't ever give yourself anything to fall back on, you'll fall back on it. And the point was, if you're going to be something, just be it. And I think that Craig Lieske might have lived that more than just about any other person I know. So, we're going to hear some more music of Craig's to wrap up here today. And I definitely want to raise a glass to Craig. Craig, we love you. Yeah. Yeah. And I don't even know where else to go except, we can only hope to be it like Craig. Here's to him.